I'm Cornel, and this is part 2 of drapery window installation. In video 1, we learned how to measure a window and also what size drapery for that window. That would include the width of the drapery, the draw of the drapery, and also the height of the drapery. So, from video 1, if you haven't watched it, please do so. It really helps explain where the dimensions that I'm going to talk about come from. Well, in that video we learned that when we went ahead and measured this window from edge to edge, 22 inches requires 32-inch drapery. We also determined a simple way by just taking our rod, holding it up, and getting the okay from honey. Is the height correct? And we determined it was. We made the necessary mark, and we determined that when the pole has a ring on it, the drapery height lines up with the bottom of the ring. So from the floor to the ring is 72.5 inches. So now we'd like to go ahead and mount this pole based on those dimensions we have to this wall. Well, let's start with where do the brackets go? And what we want to do, what we want to know is to mount this correctly, that the brackets are even on each side of the window and that the pole itself is even. Want it to make it look clean. Now, we're going to stick with industry standard. We can go very wide. We can really put the brackets wherever we like. We can allow a lot of space to the finial, but industry standard dictates that we allow 2 inches from the edge of the finial to the edge of the bracket, and we do that on both sides. We also learned that the ring itself will sit in the middle of that 2 inches on each side. Look how nice that looks. So we have a bracket, 2 inches of space, a little bit of overlap for the finial, and that ring sits right in the middle. That happens on each side of the pole, and that's where we get our 32 inches from ring to ring. So now we have to decide, fine, we have a 32-inch wide drapery, where do the brackets go? Well, that's easy. I'm going to show you a quick, easy trick to measure from center and center on bracket. Because when we measure for brackets, that's how we measure center on center. We're going to measure this outside of the bracket sleeve here, put our tape measure, to the inside of this bracket sleeve. When I go ahead and measure that, that gives me actually 29 3/4 exactly. We can even double check and put it on the middle. Comes up with 29 3/4. So we also know the width of this window when measured from the outside of the molding to the outside of the molding is 22 inches. Well, that gives us 7 3/4 on each side, or 7 3/4 total. So that means this dimension, center on center from bracket, is 7 3/4 inches wider than the window. Well, we have to split that in half because the bracket's going to go on this side and it goes on this side. Half of 7 3/4 is 3 7/8. So now we want to be able to mark 3 7/8 inches over from each side of the molding. Let's go ahead and do that. I can use my dad's handy square here. I'm going to line it up 3 7/8 inches over from the end. I'm able to rest it on top of the molding. If you're unable to rest it on the molding, you can take your tape measure 3 7/8 and make a small little tick mark. The reason for that is I like to have my tape measure lined up because we know the bracket is 3 7/8 over. Now we have to determine how high this is going to go. It's 3 7/8 over, but now the height. Well, we know that our drapery is 72 inches long, ½ inch off the floor to the bottom of the ring. That bottom of the ring is not the center of the bracket. If we take that dimension, it's exactly 1 inch. And what I am measuring is the bottom of the ring to the center of the bracket. 1 inch. Center of the bracket, bottom of the ring. So 1 inch. So now we know that we have ½ inch off the floor, 72-inch drapery, and 1 inch to the center of the pole, 73.5 inches. So open your tape measure, make sure you're solid on the floor, line up your tape measure with the edge of this. Try to be very accurate. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I line it up, keep it straight. You can use the molding as a guide, but keep it straight. So now I'm going to go ahead and mark 73.5 inches. So that's what I do right here. Make a nice little X. We're going to do the same on the other side. Same thing. I hold up my dad's old square here, or my old dad's square. Go ahead and hold it up and measure the same, 73.5. And I make a nice mark there. So now we know where my two marks are. 3 7/8 over and 73.5 on each side. That mark there is the center of this bracket. So when this pole hangs up there, that's what it's going to look like. That's how it's going to hang. And you know what? That looks good. Let's go with it. So now we know it is correct. What we are going to do next is to mount the base of the bracket. At the bottom of our brackets we have a little plate here. Nicely machined in, unscrews very smoothly. See how nice that is? This piece, this is the piece that we mount on each side to mount our brackets to. So now we made a little tick mark there, but it's a little small. We want to make sure we can see where the holes are. So I hold my little dad square up. Let's go make a line. Let's go about maybe an inch above and an inch below. So we have a straight line on each side. Why did you do that? I'm going to tell you why I did that. It has two holes. I want to be able to see the mark where the hole is. So I go ahead and I hold that bracket up where my center mark is, and I can see the lines extending to my hole. So I'm going to go ahead and make two little marks. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Accuracy is key. So we have our holes marked. Now we know. Make sure you mark our holes. I think we're ready to drill. So, let's do a quick review. We have our plates marked where our brackets mount to. We know that the center that we measured is 73.5 off the floor, 3 7/8 inches over. Let's get started. Many ways we can install. Now, we're installing onto drywall here. I can install onto brick, steel, wood. Most cases, in most homes, you have drywall. Drywall is constructed where we have studs behind. Now, we may have a stud back there, we may not. How I like to begin, we're going to take our drill and put our quick release chuck on there. And we're going to start with a basic screw. This is just a 1-inch hex head screw. And I'm going to take my magnetic fastener here. It's actually a 1/4-inch driver, and we're going to take the screw and we're going to start. Now before I do anything and grab a bracket, I'd like to go ahead, go to my first mark, and I'm going to begin. So I take it and I screw it in. Just take the screw and get started. Made a little pilot hole. Let's go ahead and take the bracket base, hold it up, screw it in place. I have one screw on the bracket base here, holding it up, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. Made a little hole. Alright, they're in place. They're not finished, and most certainly not strong enough to hold drapery. I put these up first to double check. We always say, measure twice, install once. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and measure. 73.5 is where I'm supposed to be on each side. And as I measure, I'm close. My right side is actually a little high. That's why we do this. So, how high was I? I'm about 1/4 inch too high on this side. What I would do, let's mark that hole on the bottom again. We're going to take this screw out. Now since I marked that hole on the bottom, I know I'm 1/4 inch too high. I'm going to lower it just another 1/4 inch. I make another mark. Now I know that's correct, but we have to make sure. Let's do it again. We're going to go ahead and make a nice little hole there. Pilot hole. I'm going to hold my bracket base up, and I'm going to screw it in. I know what you're thinking. He already made a hole up there. Luckily, the bracket bases do overlap and they cover small mistakes, but it's important to constantly measure. So now our bracket's up. Let's measure again. I'll go ahead and measure again. We are right on the money. Terrific. Those bracket bases are in the right place. So now we have to determine, is there wood back there or is it just drywall? So I'm going to go ahead, make sure my marks are marked correctly. And they are. So let's remove the bracket bases on each side. Now we have to determine, is there drywall back there? So what I do, I take off my 1/4 inch driver and I take here a 3/16 inch drill bit. All of these products are available on the website. That includes the quick release and the bit. So now I go back to the original hole and I drill and I realize there's nothing back there. Well, how do I know that? When I drill, there's no resistance. Often if there's wood, I would feel it. I wouldn't be able to go further. It would require more pressure, and taking it out, I would notice that there's some sawdust or wood shavings. That's not the case here. So I'm going to drill both holes, and I realize that's drywall. What about the other side? Let's drill again. Same thing, it's drywall. Well, how do we install into drywall where we can make sure that it's going to hold? How do we do that? Well, I'm going to show you how to work with a MOLLE fastener. This is a MOLLE fastener. What this is, we take a 1/4 inch drill bit and we pre-drill our holes, and we take these MOLLE fasteners, tighten the screw on it all the way, and into our hole we're going to take our hammer and we hammer it in the wall. By hand we take out the screw. It has a little black washer on them. This washer is part of the manufacturing process of the MOLLE gun. We won't need it, so we go ahead and put it back onto the base and allow it to stick out usually about a little less than 1/4 inch or so. And now we take our MOLLE gun. So when this is attached into the wall, we take our MOLLE gun and we attach the MOLLE screw to it and give it a good squeeze. And look what happens. It expands. That expands behind the drywall. This is what gives this fastener strength. So when we attach our bracket base and our MOLLE, it gives it strength. So now let's go ahead and install these MOLLEs onto this wall to allow us to install the bracket. So my 1/4 inch drill bit. I go ahead and I remount the holes on each side. Alright, so now we have our holes. Let's take our MOLLEs. Now we want to make sure the screw is tight on the MOLLE when you hammer it in. Sometimes when you hammer a MOLLE, often you can hammer the back of it right out if that screw isn't tight. Let's go ahead and do that. So we go ahead, hammer in our MOLLEs. We drill holes. Terrific. Now, we'll take our MOLLE gun. We can go ahead and expand our MOLLEs. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, see, we just slip it over the sleeve or the head of the bolt, give it a good squeeze. Aim down here. Okay, now we can go ahead and remove those screws. Let's do so. So I'll go ahead and take my 1/4" magnetic driver. Go ahead and remove our mollies that have been expanded behind the drywall. Great. Now we take our mounting plate, our drill, and our screw, and we're going to go ahead and screw the mounting plate right into the wall, right into our expanded molly fasteners. So let's go ahead and do that. Don't over tighten in the beginning. Let's just get one in. Let's take our second screw. Go ahead and tighten it. Don't drop it. Go ahead and tighten it. That's what we do. Okay, and if you're uncomfortable with the drill, when you get to this point, you can do it manually. But with the drill, I'm sure you'll be fine. Let's take the second one. Same thing. Go ahead and screw it in. You don't want to over tighten with a molly. Mollies are very secure. No need to over tighten them. Just make sure they're snug. And as I mentioned, once you have them in, if you're not secure with the drill, just go ahead and use a hand driver. Just make sure it's snug. Oh, these are snug. Very secure. So next, we get to install our brackets under our mounting plate. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll take them. Each bracket is made up of 3 pieces, one of which is already on the wall. The second piece is mounted with a set screw here. That's the base sleeve. And finally, the piece that attaches the pole to our little base here. So let's go ahead and take the base. If you remember, the base screws right on. See how clean that is? It's smooth and snug. We'll do the same with the other. So this. And let's go ahead and screw that one on as well. We did. So now both of our bases are secure. Now we want to go ahead and install our pole and the remaining piece of the bracket. And before we do that, once we go ahead and put the pole up, we need to get our rings on. Well, our drapery is split draw drapery made of 2 panels. Each panel has 5 pleats. So that gives us a total of 10 rings. But as we know, we have a ring on each end between the finial and bracket. So that leaves us 8 rings in the center. So let's go ahead and count out 8 rings and put them on the pole. So we'll go ahead and do that. 8 rings. We'll take the remaining piece of the bracket. Now make sure your set screw isn't too tight. You don't want to scratch the pole when we put it on. So also make sure your set screws are on top. It's very unsightly that when we install this and you see the set screws on the bottom, or one on top, one on the bottom, well, we don't want that. We want them on top, much cleaner. So let's go ahead and put this in place. So we stick each shaft into our bracket base. Take your screwdriver and let's tighten the base. Go ahead and do that on each side. Make sure we're secure. On the right side. Now I'm securing the shaft into the base. The pole is still loose. We can slide the pole from end to end, but what we want to make certain that this dimension is the same as this dimension. Well, we know we wanted 2 inches plus 3 8-inch overlap from the finial sleeve. Let's go ahead and measure. So, should have 2 3/8, 2 3/8. And we do. We are right on the money. Let's go ahead and tighten that. So we're going to tighten our set screws, which are on top. Do that on each bracket. We're almost finished with the installation of the drapery rod. We have 2 more rings, 1 on each side. And we have our finials. Loosen the set screw a little. I don't loosen it too much. We don't want it to fall out and go looking for it. So make sure that set screw is also on top. Makes for a cleaner installation. Look how nice that looks. See? That's 1. Do the same thing on the other side. Our ring is in place. Let's put the bracket on. And let's tighten it. We do. Finials in place. Rings are on. Our decorative drapery rod is installed. We are now ready to go ahead and hang drapery.